Okay, so let me tell you a story. Back in 2012, one of America's four big wireless carriers was basically left for dead. I mean, it was bleeding customers, it didn't have a modern network, and its parent company had just completely failed to sell it off. But what happened next? Well, it wasn't a slow death. It was a full-blown revolution that ended up changing the entire industry forever. This is the story of T-Mobile's Uncarrier Revolution.
To really get this comeback, you have to understand just how terrible things were. By 2012, T-Mobile was firmly, without a doubt, in last place. Dead last. Number 4 out of 4, with what looked like no way forward.
And look, this wasn't just a feeling people had. The numbers were absolutely grim. Its German parent company, Deutsche Telekom, had tried to unload it to AT&T for a whopping $39 billion, but the US government stepped in and blocked the deal. All of a sudden, T-Mobile was this unwanted asset, the problem child that nobody knew what to do with.
Let's just tick off the problems here. While its rivals, Verizon and AT&T, were rolling out their super-fast 4G LTE networks, T-Mobile had nothing. Zero. They also couldn't sell the iPhone, the single most important phone on the planet at the time. They were losing customers hand over fist every single quarter. And to top it all off, their customer service was ranked the worst in the entire industry. That failed sale really did look like the final nail in the coffin.
But, and this is a big but, to see how they pulled out of this nosedive, we have to look way back into the company's DNA. Because from the very beginning, T-Mobile, or as it was called back then, VoiceStream, had this habit of making these wild, contrarian bets that somehow would pay off decades later.
So picture this, it's the 90s, and the US wireless market is a chaotic mess. You had all these different incompatible technologies. But while everyone else was betting on these fragmented standards, VoiceStream made this really crucial and kind of lonely bet on GSM. That was the single standard that pretty much all of Europe and most of the world was using. That one decision put them on the same track as the future of global mobile tech.
And that early bet on a global standard, it created this culture of innovation. In 2002, we're talking 5 years before the iPhone even existed, T-Mobile launched the Sidekick. It was this total cultural icon with a keyboard, cloud sync, even apps. Then in 2008, when AT&T had the iPhone locked down, T-Mobile partnered with a tiny little company called Google to launch the T-Mobile G1, the world's very first Android phone. They were literally building the future while everyone else was just focused on the now.
Which brings us right back to that disastrous, failed AT&T deal. What looked like a public humiliation turned out to be the single most important thing that ever happened to T-Mobile. This wasn't a defeat, it was the seed money for a revolution.
So here's the kicker. Because AT&T failed to buy them, they were legally on the hook to pay T-Mobile a breakup fee. And that fee was huge. It came in two parts, $3 billion in cold, hard cash, and another $1 billion worth of precious radio spectrum. That's $4 billion in total, for a deal that didn't even happen.
So what do you do with a giant, unexpected pile of cash and assets? Well, you use it to build a comeback engine. They took that money and spectrum and finally built their own nationwide 4G LTE network. They used it to fund a radical new strategy, and they went out and acquired another carrier, Metro PCS, to instantly boost their customer base.
And to lead this charge, they brought in a CEO who was, well, unlike any other CEO in corporate America, John Legere. The guy wore magenta t-shirts, he swore on stage, and he had one simple mission: listen to what customers were angry about, and then burn the entire industry rulebook to the ground.
And that, my friends, brings us to the Uncarrier Revolution. Now, this wasn't just some catchy marketing slogan. No, this was a systematic attack on every single thing customers hated about the wireless industry. The first shot they fired was absolutely massive. In March 2013, T-Mobile completely got rid of the 2-year contract. At the time, this was just unthinkable. Contracts were how the carriers locked you in, right? They'd charge you hundreds in fees if you even thought about leaving. T-Mobile basically set their customers free and eventually forced their competitors to do the same.
Next up, they took on another huge pain point: international roaming fees. You know, when you'd come back from vacation to a phone bill that was bigger than your hotel bill? Yeah, they made data and texting completely free in over 100 countries. Just like that, you could use your phone abroad without being terrified. It was a total game changer.
And then they killed the most dreaded fee of all, the data overage charge. Instead of punishing you for using your phone too much, T-Mobile just introduced truly unlimited data plans. This completely changed what customers expected and forced the entire industry to rethink how they made money.
So, did it work? Oh yeah, it absolutely worked. In just the 5 years after they launched the Uncarrier strategy, T-Mobile more than doubled its customer base. They went from 33 million to over 70 million subscribers. They went from losing customers every quarter to leading the entire industry in growth.
But the real masterstroke, the checkmate move, was still to come. In 2020, T-Mobile merged with its rival, Sprint. And while everyone was focused on the customer numbers, the real prize was something you couldn't even see: an invisible asset that would lock in their dominance for the next decade.
You see, this deal was never really about just adding Sprint's customers. It was a calculated, brilliant move to get their hands on Sprint's massive, underused stash of radio frequencies, what we call spectrum. And that was the key to winning the race to 5G.
Specifically, Sprint had a treasure trove of something called mid-band spectrum. You can kind of think of it as the Goldilocks frequency for 5G. It's not as far-reaching as the low-band stuff, but it's way faster. And it's not quite as fast as the super high-band frequencies, but it travels much, much farther and actually goes through walls. It's that perfect sweet spot balance for an amazing 5G network.
The result of this chess move was a massive strategic advantage. After the merger, T-Mobile had more of this critical mid-band spectrum for each subscriber than anyone else. And we're not talking about a small lead. This was a structural advantage that let them build a faster, more reliable 5G network than their rivals. It's a lead they still have today.
So that brings us to today. With this dominant 5G network in their pocket, T-Mobile is now taking that same Uncarrier playbook and aiming it at a new, even bigger target: the cable industry. It turns out that massive 5G network had a lot of extra capacity. So what did they do? They started offering home internet service completely wirelessly. And the result? By early 2024, they'd already signed up 6.4 million home internet customers. That makes them the fastest growing broadband provider in the entire country.
And they are not stopping there. They're pushing this big AI-driven transformation to make their customer service even better. And they've even partnered up with SpaceX to provide satellite-to-cell coverage. We're talking about getting a signal in remote areas where cell towers can't even reach. They're totally redefining what a wireless carrier can even be.
And that leaves us with this one big question. The Uncarrier playbook worked like a charm against the wireless guys. But can that same strategy, simple pricing, no contracts, focus on the customer, can it really disrupt the big, entrenched cable giants? You know, the ones that have had a monopoly on the wires going into our homes for decades. T-Mobile's entire next chapter really depends on that answer.